Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to our program today. Now, if you are familiar with our program, what we kind of do is we kind of take an individual film and me and the guest, we kind of critique and analyze and have a conversation about this movie. So sometimes it will be a very lively conversation in which we have a really good time talking about movies. And sometimes it's a conversation that's, well, maybe not so lively for those films that just aren't as good as we would have liked them to be. That being said, one of the things we're doing this month is we're kind of focusing on franchises. So we're taking an entire franchise and kind of talking about each individual film in that franchise over the course of a single episode. So each film will have its own episode. So we're doing that. It's a new thing for us, but we want you to hopefully enjoy this process as we're doing it, because the franchise that we are discussing today is the Final Destination franchise, and the individual film that we are doing for this particular episode is Final Destination number 5. So we kind of worked our way all the way through to number 5, and to discuss this movie with me today and have a conversation about this movie today is Philip Ray, who we've kind of been talking about all the movies in the franchise. So it's going to be good for us to cap off this franchise with number 5, because if you've been paying attention to the show, we had already done the latest one, Bloodlines, earlier in the year. So we're happy to bring you this final one from us. So Philip, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
Good. So we're down to the very, very last film in the franchise, and we've discussed all of them now up to this point. So I can imagine that you have some things to say about this movie in particular.
This movie's kind of a mixed bag, to be honest. There are some things, some small individual things I like about this movie, and then there are some things I do not like about this movie. It is definitely a mixed bag movie.
You know, I had forgotten about most of this film because I'd only seen it the one time at the theater until doing the show. And we've discussed this before, and that's essentially what happened to me with parts 3, 4, and 5. I'd seen them once, completely forgot what was in them until I rewatched them for the show, and that's how I felt in this one too. There were some interesting differences with this film than they did in the previous films, which I will discuss. But the thing is, this film kind of starts off like all the other ones. They have a formula which we started to get through as we watched the other movies. There is a basic formula that these films follow from point A to point B.
Yeah, so in this one, it's a bridge, which again, I'll give credit. That's one step already did better than the last film, as we talked about, where the last film, it was a NASCAR raceway, which again, yeah, people see NASCAR, but I love the general. That's not really something. It felt a little bit too niche. While this one, it was over a bridge, which was like, yeah, no, that's actually a valid. It was a more of a valid fear for you have your original. So a little fun trivia. Originally, a water park was the director's idea, but that got rejected. So they ended up going with the bridge, which maybe I would love to have seen what that water park idea would have been. Maybe we'll see it in another Final Destination movie. But the bridge idea was cool. The execution was a little sloppy. This movie, I mean, all the movies kind of relied on like some green screen to a point, but this one was very obviously green screen for the beginning of it. And this was the last of the Final Destination films to be advertising the 3D aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So we get that sprinkled up throughout. And there were some decent 3D moments in this movie that you could tell. I didn't get to see the movie in the 3D, but you could tell watching it and stuff. But the opening sequence is very heavy green screen and very obvious, and I think works at some points and doesn't work at some points.
There's a lot in this movie that didn't work for me. So, if you've been paying attention to this show, and I do mention this every once in a while, where the casts for a lot of these older films seem very one-sided in terms of the color. I guess is the best way to put it. So, and the Final Destination movies have been some of the worst case of this because there's always like the single African American character in these films, and they're always in all of them. They've always been a male character, whether it was a cop or it was one of the people who are actually going to get killed. And it doesn't change for this. But the thing is, the characters all of the characters in this movie seem completely out of place because it's supposed to be they all work for this corporation that has salespeople and manufacturers, and but none of them actually do that for their full-time job except for the main guy Dennis. I can't remember who plays him, but the character actor who's in a shit ton of comedies.
Sam.
No,
No. Oh, you're talking. David. Koshner.
I can never pronounce his name. Him and of course the Peter character. Those are the only two who feel like this is their job. Everyone else in this movie has a different job, and you're wondering why the fuck they decided to do that. The main character Sam wants to be a cook. You know, the other one girl who's the intern is a gymnast. You know, everyone seems to have they'd rather be doing something than what they're doing, what their job is. And Nathan, who is is the only African American of the people who are tasked with being killed, is the one who seems the most out of place in the job that he has been given. Like, he does not seem like he should be in that job to be over a bunch of day labor workers who work for a union, and everything he has down there with those people seems completely out of place to me.
It is definitely out of the group. This is, I think, this is one of the first times where they really kind of, I mean, we had in like Final Destination 2 where like the people dying were like adults, but this one really, it was, the cast it's talking about things that like didn't really work. The cast was definitely one of those where, like, again, you had two very well-known comedic actors being in the movie, and really kind of weird. Like, you can have like, you know, like in the first Final Destination, we had the actor who was always in, who was all in the I can't remember his name again. We had the comedic actor in the first movie, Sean Scott, okay. But like, he wasn't so comedic. But in this one, we have two very like well-known comedic actors, and David Conner, and then who's the other one? What was his name?
I can never remember his name.
Paul Jeffrey Bryan, and it was very like,
is that Isaac? Is he the one that plays Isaac?
He's the one that plays Isaac, and I was like, what is going on here? I was like, it was so weird to have them both in this movie. Like, the cast was just very like combination of not memorable. Like, this is one of the only ones who are memorable are literally the actors that are literally comedians, and it's not because you don't remember them because of you remember them because of the actors. Like, oh, look, it's that actor versus the characters. The characters in this definitely are one of the more forgettable ones in the whole series.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed when I rewatched it because I had forgotten that Courtney B. Vance is in the movie. And I like Courtney B. Vance, but then I realized, oh, he's just playing a cop character like the cops in the first movie who can't seem to put the two and two together. And then, of course, he gets killed at the very end. I was like, why are you in this movie? You must have done this for a paycheck because this is like below some of the best stuff you've done. And I guarantee you they put these people in there for that have those kind of a couple of name actors because the other actors are all pretty forgettable.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of continues on from the problem with the last movie of the lead being extremely unmemorable, and the same thing happens with this movie with Sam, played by Nicholas D'Agosto. He was not memorable. And
you know what? I didn't mind the actor. I think the character was pretty fucking flat. Because he seems to be this guy who's doing this corporate job he doesn't want to do, but he wants to be a chef. But every like everything we see him in, he's in the other restaurant. And like, does he actually go to work? Except for, it was an odd movie. It was an odd choice to put these type of characters. I like the concept of putting like a group of people who are supposed to be going out on a retreat, a team building retreat. But the idea of going on a team building retreat is completely lost in the rest of the film. It's just a means to get these people on a bus, to get them all on the bridge. And then these are the characters that we follow through the rest of the movie. And so for anyone who's listening and who hasn't seen this movie, it's essentially a group of co-workers are going on a team building retreat. I don't know if it's team building or not, but they're going on a retreat. So I can only assume it's a team building exercise.
It's the kind of a company retreat. So,
and so they're going on this retreat, and unfortunately, they're on a bridge that's under construction, and that's when the Final Destination bridge collapses and everyone dies. And of course, like the first movie and like subsequent movies, the first thing we do after everyone dies is there's a big funeral for the people who died, and they say, why did we survive when so many people were killed, blah blah blah. I mean, there's nothing new with the plot in this film.
Other than, I will give them one credit. Well, first, to kind of put a bow in the bridge scene. The other thing with the bridge scene is it goes on for so long. It is actually the longest death, like intro death of the series. And I think that's a problem, because the problem is like, if anyone who's seen, unless you're new and why are you watching the fifth one, it's like everyone knows, okay, kind of knows the formula. So the fact that it's like it draws on for so long, you kind of get like, okay, let's get to it. Especially because some of the deaths are just very wackily silly, but like in a dumb way. Like, you have what was her name? You have the Olivia character.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way she dies is like she can't see, so she has a Velma moment. She can't see. They're trying to get her across the thing, and she ends up falling. And again, like anyone that knows, like, okay, so you think, oh, okay, she's dead, but then they show she's alive, and you're like, oh, okay. For only her to then get killed by like she sees a car fall on her, and that was it, and was like, why was that necessary? I'm like, that wasn't even that interesting. Like, so it was just such a weird. It was just like that was a problem. I get the idea they're going with, but it was like it just was so drawn out. And again, because it's so obviously green screen, like they're a really bad green screen with that opening sequence. So you're just it's kind of unimpressive.
Yeah, and you know what? When I originally watched it, because I did see it, I'm pretty sure I saw this in 3D, because I was still in that phase where I was seeing everything in 3D if I could. I'm pretty sure that I enjoyed the beginning. This is only parts of the movie I really enjoyed, but the overall film was not memorable enough for me to ever go back and rewatch it, kind of like the third and fourth one. But that would be because the later deaths are kind of all not as interesting. This film has some gruesome deaths, but then they also have some that are not so gruesome. It's like they did like.
There's definitely there's some mundane deaths. So, unpinning what I was about to say before about one thing I do appreciate, at least them attempting to try and do something new, is the new concept they introduced of killing someone gives you their lifespan. So I thought that was at least an interesting wrinkle to add to the plot. So at least it feels a little different.
Well, it's a concept that really doesn't work all that well in theory, because I was rewatching it. It's like, well, they tried to make it sound like that, but then it gets convoluted at the very end because you're trying to figure out one between what's his face, Peter killing the cop, getting his life, and then of course his lifespan, so to speak, and of course Sam killing Peter supposedly saved him, and then of course what's his face, the Nathan, who accidentally kills the one guy at work and getting his face, but then it doesn't make any fucking sense because by the end of the movie we reroute it back to the very first movie and they all still die. So that whole concept seems kind of a moot point because it doesn't matter what new rules they try and explain, they kind of explain them away to have a roundabout way of connecting all the movies. It would have been cool if it had been something that played off of itself. It actually had a payoff, but it doesn't really have a payoff because that still just gets them regardless.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I can agree with that. It is definitely not, which is funny why in Bloodlines they reference that, but then the characters don't actually do it. They go, okay, well, we're not doing that. Moving on. Uh, but yeah, so going to the deaths, yeah, they are still very kind of mundane. Probably the best, and it's not the death, but I will give credit. Probably the best sequence leading up to a death is the gymnast scene,
Mhm.
because I can tell you, probably for a lot of people, especially me, I don't know about you, my butthole was clenched watching that screw dangle and stuff. The lead up to that was great. Now, Candace's death was stupid as hell and probably the most convoluted death out of all of Final Destination. Uh, it was the most unrealistic of the whole thing, but the lead up was probably one of the better I've seen in the series in general. Oops, sorry.
What
Uh,
character is this?
that is Candace. That's the
Oh,
character.
Candace. Yeah,
Yeah, so like the lead up, the gym scene,
yeah.
such a great scene. It was very tense. But yeah, and then she ends up dying because her body just folds like cardboard when she like lands. Was like, what? It was so bad because it was like, that's not how is her bones made of cardboard? How did her body just contort like that? So it's
This film
definitely
seems
stupid.
to be like a Saw movie where they kept trying to come up the one up themselves with later sequels, but as the sequels gone on, the deaths became less interesting because they just seemed too far fetched. I
And
will.
see like the scene, the laser, the Olivia character going to get laser eye surgery. That was again like the lead up to that was a great idea because again that is something that can play up to common people's fears. And then yeah, then Velma dies again, where she just like ends up falling out the. It's the same thing. It reminded me of the Found Destination 2 with the kid in there with the dentist and stuff.
Dennis.
It reminded me the exact same, where it's like, oh, we're in this thing. Oh, what kind of like gruesome, neat way are we going to see them die? And then they ended up not dying in the uh, place itself, but dying in a more mundane way. Of in Found Destination 2, it was the pigeons causing the panel to fall on the kid, and in this, it's she just trips and falls, and she falls out the window. I'm like, well, that's kind of lame. You have this pretty awesome office, and then you just end up killing them in a mundane way. They could have been anywhere and died like that. That it's like you didn't need them to be in the laser. They needed them to be there in the area they're in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and
Isaac's another one. Isaac's another interesting idea of okay, the Isaac character, he's in this place getting acupuncture, and again, it's like people who thought about getting acupuncture and the fears with that, and that again is played up really intensely, and then he dies in the most mundane way. Like it's in this movie in particular, a lot of the characters just die in the most mundane way, and it's disappointing because they set up a lot of the deaths in interesting environments.
yeah. Well, you brought up something I wanted to make mention of. You brought up the fact that Candace's death, not Candace's, Olivia's death reminded you of Final Destination 2, and of course, Isaac's death reminded me of the sun tanning accident in I can't remember which sequel now.
That's in 3.
Not 3. And it seemed like I said, they were trying to find new ways, new locations, and new ways to kill people, but they weren't they weren't thinking too far outside the box. I
No, because even in 3 with the tan salon, they at least die by the tan salon. Versus in this, he doesn't get killed by acupuncture. He gets there's a statue in the office that just falls on his head. I'm like, that has nothing to do with him being an acupuncture. He could have been literally anywhere, and something could have fell in his head.
Well, you also have to keep in mind that I guess the death had an extra hand on smashing it into his head, whereas no one would put anything that heavy up on a shelf to begin with if it could smash your head. It just wouldn't sit up there; it'd be sitting on the ground. So, you might get a concussion or a gash, but this is like extreme, like the gymnastic sequence, like extreme. This statue like smashes his head in. I think by this film they were like, well, it doesn't have to be logical. We just have to make it gory. Is what I think they were going with.
It's kind of like a gory Looney Tunes is what a lot of
Yes.
that kept making me think of. It's like a gory Looney Tunes. It's like I would see this stuff in a Looney Tunes commercial. The difference is they get back up on this, they all explode into a billion pieces. Like that's how I felt about uh that's how I felt about Nathan's is it Nathan? No. Dennis. That's how I felt about Dennis's death. Like Dennis in the opening bridge with the hot oil, and then again him getting killed by the wrench. It just felt like gory Looney Tunes. It was like,
Well,
it was, and they were trying to get back that, because in the last movie they were really kind of hamming it up on trying to be comedic, and this one they were trying to be a little bit more serious again, and it just didn't work with the gory Looney Tunes.
well,
death.
and Dennis's death reminded me of Sean William Scott's death in the first one, where you're not thinking he's gonna die right then and there, and all of a sudden his head gets chopped off by a piece of the car in the wreck, and that's how I saw this one. It was like, oh, okay, so because I was working hard, and I would have never noticed it had we not watched all these films so close to each other.
There's a lot of like, feels like kind of callbacks to a point with a lot of these deaths. There's a lot of like they die and you go, oh, okay, that's like this death in this movie, or this death in this movie.
I think that's on purpose because it's trying to be the very last one. They weren't planning on doing this. Was like designed to be the very last one because it calls back to the first film, and of course at the very end during the credits, you're seeing all the great death scenes from all the sequels
Yeah.
and all the films. So I kind of get it, but on a rewatch, it makes for a less interesting film. Like it didn't enhance the film; it actually brought its own elements down when you rewatch it. In my
Yeah,
opinion.
because it's just kind of uninteresting callbacks.
Yeah.
Also, one nitpick talking again, going in relation to the bridge scene again.
Hmm.
Uh, it also is the most convoluted because of how long it goes and where Sam goes. Sam, in a lot of the other previous Final Destinations, they did a mostly good job of making sure the protagonist was aware of how everyone died, so
I was
they
gonna
could
make a
see
comment
it
to that. Go ahead.
was going to be able, so they could remember the order later. In this movie, there's no way he figured out that thing because of how like spread out that scene is. It's like he would have never seen half of the people died because he was already halfway across the bridge.
So this one's a weird one, and you brought up part of my issue with it is that Sam is the only character in the franchise so far who didn't and was not able to see the deaths of anyone else in the movie. He does not have that ability at all. He only knows how everything works is because Tony Todd's Bloodworth character shows up at each one of the locations that where the deaths are because he's the head coroner, and of course he has that has to explain everything scene with him. But it seems odd that he stays up all night to try and figure out what's everything's happening, and he comes up with the order. Like, what would have prompted that shit? Because he's not seeing these people's deaths before they happen. It seemed odd. This movie seems to have relied too much on the audience already knowing all the rules, so they don't explain the rules to the characters. But except for the fact that now you can kill somebody, get their life, and survive, which I thought was a stupid plot device. And which
I think that wouldn't be too bad if, like you said, it actually was properly like used. Instead, again, like every most of the other except for two, like every other Final Destination movie, at the end the main characters have to get it. The only thing I would say an exception with this movie is, I know you said you didn't really like it. I actually was okay. The twist of the fact that Final Destination, that this was a lead up to the first one, I actually liked. That actually was a nice surprise. Again, like you said, it does kind of nullify Sam, like, so it nullified the whole killing someone gives you their lifespan, but that was a nice. I will give them credit for a nice twist at the end when you're like, oh,
Well, no,
like
when I saw it at the theater, I thought, oh, this is shit. This is amazing. I don't know, it calls back to the first film. I really liked it when I originally saw it. But upon rewatch, they plant that so much in this movie. It is fucking ridiculous. Like, they're mentioning Paris like 20 times. I got a job in Paris. Maybe I don't want to go to Paris because there's no one there that I know. It's an intern job in Paris. I'm not gonna go to Paris. I don't think you should go to Paris. I do. When I started rewatching, I was like, oh my god, it's like 3 times is all you need to do, dude. That's it. It's like in there all the fucking time. And I was like, oh god, this is like it was a problem for me, but that wasn't as big a problem as the fact that this is the only one of all the movies where they create a villain at the end, and that becomes really, really bad for me. Because that whole concept of if you kill someone, you get their life bullshit. I'm gonna call it bullshit. Has Peter going from a sympathetic friend character to a devil in disguise, where he's going to kill his more or less best friend's girlfriend in order to save his own life. And I'm like, oh god, I'd forgotten all this stuff, and there was a reason, because it was such a dumb concept to begin with. I was like, you already have the greatest villain there is, death. Death is the greatest villain, but you have to shoehorn in a physical human as a villain, and I did not. And then that makes their whole killing people to get their life. It convolutes the ending when death doesn't want to. Death was a convoluted thing already. I was like, I did not. I cared for the ending a lot less than when I originally saw it. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, another thing too is with that too, and I didn't think about it until you just pointed it out. So the reason too Peter's trying to kill Molly is because in the premonition she does not die.
Correct, which I also thought was weird.
which was then weird at the end when Molly's the first to die out of the two on the plane, which doesn't make any sense. But also, I will say this was another like, and this is the problem of the movie. Less is more, in my opinion. I think the movie would have been more impactful if it ended as soon as like Sam and Molly see the events of the first one happening, and then Sam comes to realize like, oh crap, we're in danger, and then we cut to black, and then we already know what happens. But no, the movie has to make sure the audience like, oh, we've got to get one more good death end, which 2 more death ends, which they weren't really
3 more
that
deaths.
good. 3 more deaths.
You gotta get Nathan too.
Yep, because you got to get Nathan too and stuff. And was like, no, I think it would have been way more impactful if we got the implication that they died on the plane. I mean, they did that in Final Destination 3, where they didn't have to show us the actual characters dying. You know they're gonna die. You don't have to show it. It actually leaves more to your imagination of how it went down versus this, where it's like another bad effect of Sam like getting burned up in the flames and stuff, and I guess and looking like he's going to be the next Spawn.
Yeah, they should have cut it as soon as Sam realized that the reason why the people were getting off the plane is that they had one guy was screaming that there's going to be a plane crash, and you cut to outside, you see the fucking thing blow up, and then you follow the wheel you see the wheel go down, but you don't see where it goes yet, because then you cut to Nathan, and then the wheel hits Nathan. That would have been a much more effective ending, in my opinion.
Yes.
Instead of having, you're right, instead of having to see what's her face get chopped in half by the wing of the frickin' plane, and of course him burning up in the seat, and I think they wanted to be more impactful and gory at the very end. But you all gotta remember that the first Final Destination simply showed the one character, I can't remember his name now, and the sign almost smashing into him and cut to black, and that was amazing. That was like, it's still effective. That was, if we talked about that, it's still a great ending because you don't have to see anything else.
I think, and this is in so many horror movies, the phrase less is more is so prevalent in so many, especially horror movies or in general, less is more. And that's when you know you have a good filmmaker versus a bad filmmaker. A lot of times, the less you show, the better, because people's imaginations are a lot more creative than actual visually seeing it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of times filmmakers either don't trust the audience, or they want to just, or they think it looks cool to do certain things when it's like, no, actually been more effective if you didn't show me, and then I just imagined what actually would have happened.
Yeah, it's like I told you, the one ending for the film where they switch it to the X-ray version of everything, and you see the X-rays of all the characters dying. I can't remember which one that was, but I thought that was extremely effective for an ending. We didn't have to see the characters, you know.
That was 4. 4 actually was what you're thinking of.
I'm glad that you can remember these specifics, because I forget, because I'm not looking at my notes over all of the movies.
But yeah, but 4's the one that ends with the X-ray, which again, even with that, I could have said you could have not even shown that and just, again, cut to black, and still would have been like effective. But yeah, it's just, it kind of, for me, a lot of this kind of felt self-indulgent with the gore. It's, yep. Again, so you saw earlier, that's perfectly, at this point in the series, it felt like they were jumping in on the Saw bandwidth of torture porn, of, oh, we need to show, like, we got to go as gory as we can, we need to just go over the top as we can, and a lot of times it's like, doesn't really do, like, and it'll be fine if the deaths actually were something you could remember, but like you said, this movie is very forgettable. It's honestly even more forgettable than Final Destination 4, because at least everyone remembered the NASCAR stuff, because they were like, why did you put in a NASCAR place? And this, it's like, it's just forgettable.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it may have sounded like a great idea at the time, having like a bridge collapse, but
which, again, I think if it was actual practical effects, you would remember it. Again, there's a reason why Final Destination 2's the car crash scene is so memorable, because they actually did practical. They practicaled that whole entire sequence at the beginning. And again, especially horror movie, it's another common thing is, if you do stuff practically, you will remember it a lot better than if you just CGI it. Sometimes CGI can be great, but again, people remember the practical of Aliens first look than all the CGI aliens down the line. People are going to remember the practical of The Thing, the original, more than the CGI of The Thing's sequel. And that's a thing that's just, again, it's, everyone just wants to use CGI, and that's the easiest thing to do. But it's a thing of like, hey, when you do practical, people remember it more.
Well, I do want to mention, since you mentioned part 2, that this movie does pay homage to that one with the at the very beginning, before they get on the bridge, you see the truck with all the logs on it again, which I kind of laughed at. But it's also with that thing where they play at the 180 thing a whole shit ton a lot in here. But the thing is, if this takes place before Flight 180 from the first movie, why the fuck are we seeing 180 everywhere again? I'm like, there's certain things like that to just kind of, you're like, it doesn't make a rewatch of this film nearly as well as if you watched it once. because you don't know how it ends when you watch it the first time. But when you rewatch it and you're wondering why all these callbacks are, it seems like, oh man, it just seems stupid because the Flight 180 is just like, oh, we're just making reference to the fact that the original movie was called Flight 180. It wasn't called Final Destination, and 180 shows up in part two. And I think
I think 180. They're trying. What the Final Destination series did is they tried to make 180 the Pixar A1313. I think it's what it is in like the Pixar movies. They were trying to make it that with the 180 being like, oh look, 180 is in all of the things, and it's just kind of like, eh.
Yeah, you could be right about that, but I'm not thinking too much on this because by the time part five comes around, if the filmmakers aren't thinking too hard about it, I probably shouldn't be thinking about too hard about it either. Uh, that being said, we haven't actually talked a whole lot about the plot, but to be honest with you, listeners, if you've seen one Final Destination film, you most definitely have seen the plot in this one, and we've gone over most all the death scenes except for probably Roy, actually, the person that Nathan ends up accidentally killing, and in theory getting his life, his lease on life to himself. Um, that seems to be like it was like because he actually falls and gets a fucking hook to his head, which seems to be something I've seen in other movies. So it's not all that memorable, to be honest with you. Like his death isn't memorable because he's one of the deaths you don't actually see at first. You know, I don't know. I don't know what to say about this movie other than it was a movie that I'm sure it's kind of like I see this movie as like Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Like, oh, we know this is gonna be the last movie, so we need to make it. We need to make it make sense to the whole franchise. This is gonna be the last one. And Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare is one of those films where it follows all the typical tropes of a Nightmare on Elm Street film without breaking any real new ground. And then, of course, they try to tell the origin of Freddy and all that stuff that no one really fucking cared about to begin with. Uh, um, this film, I think probably has Tony Todd show up the most because he shows up at each one of the, I think three or four times. I think.
Yeah.
Whereas normally he's relegated to one scene.
Yeah, they literally get him early on just so he can be like, all right, here you go. Here's the new rules. Okay, bye.
Yeah, it's I'm glad he got a little bit more. This franchise was really weird with him. Like you get this great actor in there, but he's only in like a scene in each film he's in, or he's like the voice of the devil in the one that part three.
Or forward, he just didn't even exist.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of like, what enticed you to do these, Tony?
Yeah, the only thing that makes it worth it is because it's funny because if you watch it, you're just like, why are we always going back to this one guy? Which again, I appreciate the fact that Bloodlines finally like kind of like bowed the character, so it's like, okay, now you made the character worth it for being in almost all of these anyway.
Yeah. I will agree with you on that aspect of it because he's in this one when you know that it's a prequel to the first movie and he knows more than he's telling everyone. It actually does play in the fact that he has a background with all this to be able to know this information and instill it upon others. I didn't mind him showing up more in this film than he did in the other scenes. I mean, the other films. I actually enjoyed that, and it's also because we talked about Bloodline so much already, and how well that incorporated all the concepts into one great movie there, with a really elaborate opening sequence as well. But that was a really, really, really well done opening sequence.
Yeah, that one again, it added more. Like again, like that one was just done. It was just more well acted because again, we talked about it in our Bloodlines episode, but like again, the characters were more likable and more interesting. But interesting and stuff versus this, which was just again, it's run the mill, same thing like because in Bloodlines 2, it's only two characters we're really following versus in this, where it's like again, it's the stereotypical got a whole crap ton of characters that were like we got to go. Okay, these are the kill lists. These are the people who are going to die at some point.
I guarantee you they did it this way so that you can get to know the characters more than what happened in the fourth film, where like we talked about them. They had like the cowboy and the rapist, and they became very nondescript security guard. They became nondescript characters instead of real flesh and blood characters to the audiences because we never got to know their names or anything. And with this film, they're all co-workers, so in a sense they would know each other, and I could see why they went with this aspect because they didn't do this with any of the other films, except for maybe with the first one, since they're all students in the same French class. But they kind of didn't. They kind of stepped away from that with all the other films. I can see why they went back to something like that. I just think it was an odd choice. Like, there's just something about this movie overall, upon rewatching it, that just doesn't fit or gel with me. It can be a whole bunch of little things, but there's no overarching like one big thing. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, again, I think this was definitely franchise fatigue. By the time you get to the fifth one, I mean, it already was felt in the fourth one, like you said. This one, it felt like they were trying their best to kind of course correct to get the series a little bit back on its feet, but not. But again, I think the idea of trying to introduce a new aspect to the rules of killing gives you their again killing gives you their lifespan is a neat idea. It's just not executed well, and it's just like everything in this is just not executed well. And it's funny because in general, one thing that's kind of a common thread I've noticed, I said the same statement both in this movie and the last movie, was missed opportunities. It's became very prevalent this series. Had a lot of missed opportunities. Again, it reminds me of off mic we were talking about Jurassic Park and stuff, the Jurassic World series and stuff, and I think Final Destination is very on point with that. Of like, they always wanted to just go safe. They don't want to go too crazy. They just want to do safe, and I think this movie is safe. It's very by the numbers. It's franchise fatigue, and I think that is probably what you're feeling because I mean. That is how I felt. That's what the audience felt with this movie. It made less money than the previous movie.
Well, the previous one's the highest grossing one, but that also came out at the heyday of 3D, which is why so many people want to go see it. Because you could watch it in 3D, and you could watch it. I wouldn't be surprised if they also had it on IMAX screens at the time too, because they were doing that with a lot of 3D movies too. So, I don't have the figures anymore. That was a long time since I saw that one. But I do remember it being one of the more popular and successful 3D movies. So it was at the very beginning of that whole craze.
Yeah, so, it definitely before Bloodlines, it was the highest gross.
Yeah. So, and thankfully they decided that they just wanted to have one more after that, and that was a good ending for a franchise. This one was a good ending to end it all, bring it all back to the first one, and they really didn't need to ever do another sequel. I don't think anyone would have thought about doing a sequel until we got into this period now where we're doing these legacy sequels. They're not reboots, and they're not like direct sequels, but they're kind of like these legacy sequels. But this is the odd legacy sequel, in that the only character that you bring back is Bloodworth, who's not really that big of a character in any of them. He's just the only one that's shown up in more than one film.
But again, Bloodlines does a good job of tying it. So I'm glad overall that they were. That's the only thing memorable at 5 is the fact that it ties it back to the first.
Yeah,
and that's it. That's the most memorable thing with this movie. So but gladly Bloodlines was able to come in, and they'll probably do another sequel since Bloodlines was so successful. But at least until that happens, we can say that today, on the day we're recording, that until they announce it, that the Final Destination was able to end on a positive note, end on a good note.
That's that's kind of like what we would have to say with the new Scream movies. They ended on a positive. They ended it on a slow, immediate point with the fourth one. Came back with the two Legacy sequels, which were really popular, and of course, the next one will probably be a cash grab for. The best word to put it is like franchise fatigue now, because you're not extending from the previous one because those actors can't return for a new one. So you're going to bring back all of the actors from previous movies, even though they died, and figure a way to shoehorn them in.
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be like Jurassic World, the third one. What's the third one? Dominion. Yeah. Like we needed that many extra characters, so we got to bring back all the originals. Jesus Christ! But hey, at least we know in Final Destination, as of right now, every character is fucking dead.
Yeah. Well, except for Final Destination 2's protagonists, who were confirmed to be alive after again, small spoilers of Bloodline, they revealed that the Final Destination 2 characters, or at least the girl, is still alive. So Final Destination 2 is the only Final Destination where the main characters were able to walk off scot-free.
Yeah, I think it was the main woman and the cop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, so to my final thoughts on Final Destination, Final Destination 5 is it's definitely forgettable. It's definitely not the worst of the series, in my opinion. Well, actually, I say that, but I don't know. This and 4 are kind of neck and neck at times as the worst of the series. Now that I think more about it, yeah, it's funny watching them both. I'm literally comparing the two in my head.
Like the fourth one has some of the best show-stopping sequences, the theater blowing up and everything else. But in this one doesn't really have any show-stopping sequences. Like
I think this actually probably is the worst of the series.
Yeah, I mean, even the escalator scene when you're watching the two people get eaten up by escalators, I mean, that's still cool as shit. But this one, like, the death scenes are like, there's not one of them, like, you hit it on the nail. You're in these locations, but the people don't die utilizing those locations. They have these mundane follow-throughs. I probably would have thought part 3 was the worst of the bunch until I rewatched them all, and this one is definitely my least enjoyable one out of all of them.
Yeah, the thing is, all the others, there's a point where you'd be like, oh, this, you see it for this kill. And in this one, there's, other than, again, the kill in the gymnastics, not cool. It's just the lead up to it was a nice scene. Yeah. But the actual death for Candace was so boring. It was so mundane. It was like, oh.
Yeah. Mundane is the perfect word for a lot of the deaths in this movie. Mundane. Yeah.
Yeah, this is probably the most mundane of the group. So yeah, that's my final thoughts.
All right, so I've already given a lot of my thoughts in this film throughout the whole thing. So I'm not gonna give any final thoughts regarding this movie, but I do want to before we get to rating this movie, I do want to say that now that we have gone through all of the films in the franchise, starting off with Bloodlines and then going through 1 through 5. This is a surprisingly successful franchise that doesn't rely on a horror icon. That's a visual horror icon. I think in and of itself that is a success for this franchise overall, and I think that is one of the things that made this an accessible film to general audiences, because they weren't stuck watching like this mass killer killing people. They were more interested in seeing like what death could bring next to these characters. I think that aspect right there is what made this such an endurable or durable franchise. So
Yeah, with Final Destination, and I said this in my definitely said this in my Bloodline, in the Bloodline episode, is at best with this series. I said this in the first Final Destination 2, is when this series is good. Again, the reason why it's so good is because when it's doing its best, it plays up to people's fears.
mhm.
Unlike everything else, you're not going to run into. I mean, you hopefully don't run into like a hockey killer. You won't run into a killer doll. You won't run into a guy in a Halloween mask. I mean, you may, um, but with this series, when it's doing its best, it plays on the common fears you've had of what if the plane blows up?
Mhm.
What if we get in a giant car accident? Even in this movie, it played up to, again, acupuncture, uh,
Mhm.
LASIK. Those are very, very common fears that people have had. And in the other series, like some of them go really stupid with theirs, but when it's doing its best, it plays on your fears of, oh, what happens if I go on a roller coaster and it falls?
Yeah.
That's why it's traumatized some people watching some of these movies because they're like, oh, geez, now I'm visually seeing my fears, and that's what made the series so smart at the beginning is them doing that. And when the filmmakers were strong for the movies they were on, they played up to those. Some of those sequences were even inspired by the filmmakers. So, like for this movie, for example, the reason there's a LASIK scene is because the director's wife had LASIK surgery in the middle during the filming and stuff, and the guy was like, I'm adding this into the movie because I was freaked out about like what could happen. And so he put that into the film. And that's what made Final Destination why Final Destination is can be such a solid series.
Okay. No, I'm not gonna. Yeah, we come back to these thoughts on previous films, so I agree with you on that. Hopefully the audience will agree with us as well, depending on which ones of the franchise they've actually seen and which ones they've actually not seen.
You don't need to see this one. That's all we can tell you.
Well, completists, they have to see everything. So, for everyone listening to the show, what we like to do is we like to rate the movies from 1 to 5 stars, one being very bad, five being amazingly excellent. I'm asking Philip you here is where in the spectrum do you place Final Destination 5?
It's a 1.5.
I give it 2 for effort. I've seen a lot of shitty movies that are much, much, much worse than this. That I would give a 1 or a half a star. And I don't actually ever give anything half a star. I just give them fucking no stars. Uh, if we get down that low. Uh,
Yeah, I give mine a 1.5. I gave mine 1.5 because my thing is I can't like I can't recommend like every other of the Final Destinations, I could maybe say like, oh, I could recommend it for this and this and this. I can't really do it for this one. Like that's why it's like there's really no recommendation for this. Like there's not a memorable actor, like member like acting. There's not a really good death scene in this. It's like it's not really for anyone, really.
it's for only completists and fans
Yeah.
of Final Destination. And even the fans of Final Destination will probably agree with us that this is the lowest the franchise gets.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you would hear about Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Freddy's Dead is probably the lowest on the ladder for most people. Uh, and there's always going to be that low mark somewhere in these franchises, especially the longer they go.
We're
Uh,
just lucky that Final Destination hasn't gone as long as some of them. Thank God it has had as many movies like the Saw franchise has had.
well, with this franchise, they did one roughly every 3 years, so they gave it 3 years time between each film. The Saw movies try to put one out every fucking year up until 7, and then 8 and 9 were kind of came afterwards, and then of course 10 was the most recent one, which is the prequel to all most of the stuff. So, you know, and that's one of the best sequels of all of them. And that was kind of like a Bloodlines thing. It was like, wow, this fucking when you go back to the wheel and come up with some cool fucking ideals, you get a Saw 10, you get a Final Destination Bloodlines. You can make a good movie, a good sequel. You just have to put some effort into that shit.
Yeah, we gotta do the next thing we need to conquer is the Saw franchise. The reason why that movie works is because you let John Kramer, who everyone likes watching, you make him the focus again after killing him off for whatever dumbass reason for that, because you're still gonna bring him back out of the well and stuff. It's like,
you forget they were thinking about making any more after part 3.
yeah,
they killed him off. It's like we're gonna kill the killer off in part 3. Oh shit! But we made too much money, so we need to find a way to keep bringing them back. So we do flashbacks from the killer who's dead, and then we have to make new killers. Oh shit!
Or somehow he predicted, oh, after I die, I'm going to leave this note here that's going to be unearthed in 5 years from this one guy who's going to know what to do in the next 10 years. Anyway.
I can't say much. I enjoy the Saw films for the most part. Yeah, you know what? We do have to tackle that. That's on our list. So for everyone listening, after this month of franchise movies, we still have plenty of franchises to tackle, and Saw is on our list. So do not fret. We will get to that one eventually. But I'm glad that we were able to get through this franchise. This was not something that was originally on our list, actually, because we loved Bloodlines so much is why we added this one. So, this was a fluke. We were never planning. It was never on our list to get to these films, but Bloodline was so good, we decided to go back. So, these happy little accidents that we do on our show are hopefully good for you all back there, and definitely good for me, because one of the things that we want to do with the show is to allow people to go back and revisit some of these films, not only just the original films, but the sequels, and maybe you'll get a clearer picture or ideal hindsight on what you liked and didn't like. Because like I've told you, Philip, I had never rewatched the 3rd, 4th, or 5th film in this franchise other than when they originally came out. It was good for me to go back and rewatch all of these films with a different perspective. I don't like them as much as I originally thought I liked them, but there are some elements in this franchise that are good. Most of them are contained in the first movie and in Bloodlines. Any other thoughts about Final Destination 5?
Nope.
All right. So I want to thank you, Philip, for joining us on Conversations in Horror, where we discussed not only Final Destination 5, but we've gone through the entire franchise now. It's been a journey. For all of you out there listening, I hope that you've enjoyed these episodes, and make sure to check out all the episodes and all the different sequels in the franchise, including our earlier one from earlier in the year on Bloodlines. Make sure to check out previous episodes. We have done a lot of great movies in this month. We are releasing a lot of great episodes on a lot of different franchises, so make sure to check those out as well. Make sure to check out our sister podcast, Conversations in 4Color, which delves deep into manga, comic books, and graphic novels. That is our Patreon supported and endorsed podcast only, so you have to be a supporter or a subscriber to access that podcast. From everyone here, Something Wicked Entertainment, we want you to have a great day and keep watching those movies, no matter how many sequels come after the original. Have a good day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.